Hello, thank you for coming. I'd like to start by answering the question that's on everyone's mind. Yes, this is real life. This is really happening.
What this is again within the theme of how to counter a dominant narrative. In this particular case, what we're doing is we're working within the mythic structures, and it's what Sun Tzu talked about. If you know yourself and you know your enemy, you will never be defeated in 1,000 battles. And this is actually working within the structures of republicanism, and right at the core of the American foundation and founding fathers is this foundational choice between a monarchy and a republic. And right at the core of the choice for the republic is worry about abuse of power. And so there's all the checks and balances that are absolutely built in. The founding fathers all were clear that the choice for the Republic was in a much older idea that goes right back to the Roman Republic. Now, there's another absolutely pivotal idea in republicanism, and it has to do with virtuousness, good behavior. And this idea of virtuousness is interesting because it actually is a term used by Machiavelli, that great studier of government. And he uses the term virtue, V-I-R-T-U, grave. But the point is, his concept of virtue means the ability to acquire and hold on to power. It doesn't mean virtuousness. So there's an irony in that what we have seen is a stunning example of the ability to acquire power and so far hold on to power through the use of myth-telling. But as we saw, the person chosen within the cowboy myth wasn't someone who was exemplary in terms of virtuous behavior. There was that wonderful character in the cowboy film says that this requires a particular type of man, and that man is not virtuous.
I don't think this is a job for the Rangers, Buck. Nor for the Army, sir. It is, I think, going to be a very harsh and unpleasant kind of business. And will, I think, require an extremely harsh and unpleasant kind of man to see to it.
So there's an interesting observation that the virtuous, in the Machiavellian sense, are not very virtuous. In a Republican sense, the issue is how unvirtuous, in a moral sense, are people willing to tolerate, even though virtuousness is right at the core of Republican ideals. But in the interest of acquiring power, there seems to be a sacrificing of virtuousness in the interest of virtue in a Machiavellian sense.
My party is going bat crazy.
And I don't think he has the temperament or judgment to be commander-in-chief.
You know how you make America great again? Tell Donald Trump to go to hell.
Donald Trump is the most unelectable Republican I've seen in my lifetime.
I'm going to try to help our president, Donald Trump, be as successful as possible because, number one, I agree with him mostly.
I like the president. I want to help him. I hope he's successful.
Trump's foreign policy is a complete disaster.
I think this strike was a game changer. There's a new sheriff in town.
What President Trump has done is historic, deserves the Nobel Peace Prize, and then some.
And Machiavelli said there's two types of leaders. In order to hold on to power, you need either be feared or loved. And in the case of the 45th president, he certainly seems to be very good at frightening anyone in countering him.
Tonight, Donald Trump warning if the Republican establishment tries to block his nomination, there will be chaos at the convention.
I think you'd have riots. You know, I'm representing a tremendous, many millions of people. I think you would have problems like you've never seen before. I think bad things would happen. I really do. I believe that. I wouldn't lead it, but I think bad things would happen.
Now, there are other Republican virtues that, or tenets really, the core of the Republican idea, like prudence and respect for the rule of law and family values that are core to the Republican idea, prudence and fiscal responsibility, that in a way seems like a space that is not occupied as clearly.
According to a recent Pew survey, white evangelical Protestants overwhelmingly support President Trump. 78% approve of his job in office, while 18% disapprove.
Essentially what we're talking about here is that within the domain of republicanism, it seems that Trumpism has moved away from a lot that's absolutely foundational to republicanism. So in the sense of Sun Tzu, maybe there's an empty space that could be occupied. In other words, the Democrats could begin to occupy some space that's typically associated with republicanism, like prudence, rule of law, respect for tradition.
I could be presidential, but if I was presidential, we'd only have about 20% of you would be here because it would be boring as hell, I will say. Now, let me be unpresidential just for a little while longer, and maybe I'll be a little bit unpresidential as I beat Hillary because,
There's two meanings of the word myth. One is myth as lie, and the other is myth as truth. And Trump's amazing because all his myths are true and all his truths are myths. And just to explain that, he does stay true to his myths. You know, the things that he campaigned on pretty much, and that's why he has such a hold. But all his truths are actually myths in the other sense of the word, lies.
Thing one tonight, Donald Trump's lies just passed a milestone, crossing the 2,000 mark. According to the Washington Post, which keeps an ongoing tally of the lies since Trump took office, and it must be hard work to stay on top of it.
One of the first things that we learned from the Homer Trump video on oral storytelling is the use of epithets, and how in oral storytelling you use epithets to structure meanings and also to help memory.
crooked Hillary, fuck.
I don't respond to Donald Trump and his string of insults.
She's been crooked from the beginning.
He can say whatever he wants to say about me.
So if one were to go down that path and use the very techniques, the way you would do it is you'd call him King Don. And he'd probably quite like that because it'd be flattering. But what you wouldn't realize is it's setting up a foundational choice. The Republicans have he's setting up as a choice between capitalism and socialism. All the Democrats are rabid socialists. But by calling him King Don, you're effectively saying, do you want a monarchy or a republic?
And you know what else they say about my people? The polls. They say, I have the most loyal people. Did you ever see that? Where I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose any voters, okay? It's like incredible.
The next foundational contrast in meaning making, because that's what we're talking about here. If you want to counter, you've got to create a world and a meaning, an identity structure. Branding is about world making. And in a way, in the Trump world, there's an element of harshness and arguable cruelty, even nastiness, as he did in a rally to abuse the widow of a dead long-term Army veteran.
She calls me up. It's the nicest thing that's ever happened. Thank you so much. John would be so thrilled. He's looking down, he'd be so thrilled. Thank you so much, sir. I said, that's okay, don't worry about it. Maybe he's looking up, I don't know.
This idea of moral exemplars is very core in American culture, and it's the idea of the city on the hill, an idea of being a beacon of virtue. And it goes back to a biblical story in Matthew, and that then carried on to Winthrop's idea of the city on the hill. And in a way, there hasn't been a sort of sense of benevolence and kindness, and we also have a capacity to be very self-sacrificing and generous and community-oriented. So that idea of the city on the hill taps into that. And actually, that great Republican Ronald Reagan, the night before the election,
I have quoted John Winthrop's words more than once on the campaign trail this year, for I believe that Americans in 1980 are every bit as committed to that vision of a shining city on a hill as were those long ago settlers.
And in his farewell speech, he talks about, I've spoken of the shining city all my political life.
But I don't know if I ever quite communicated what I saw when I said it. But in my mind, it was a tall, proud city built on rocks stronger than oceans, windswept, God-blessed, and teeming with people of all kinds living in harmony and peace. A city with free ports that hummed with commerce and creativity. And if there had to be city walls, the walls had doors, and the doors were open to anyone with the will and the heart to get here. That's how I saw it and see it still.
So essentially, what we're talking about is a city on the hill with its moral virtues and actually its inclusiveness, its openness to the world. And who said it? It wasn't a Democrat, though they did. Kennedy and Obama used the same reference. This was the Republican, that great cowboy actor, Ronald Reagan. He said this. So essentially, what is this to do? How is this of relevant to marketeers? One of the first things is framing. Trump is brilliant at framing, and the framing is basically about the story that you tell, because stories work via oppositions, good guys and bad guys. And in a way, he has structured a framing where he is the good guy and the bad guys are the elite, the immigrant, and effectively the poor.
The forgotten men and women of the United States are forgotten no more. You're the great people. You're the great people. You work hard, you pay your taxes, you do all these things, and you were forgotten. They forgot about you. And you're the smartest people. You're the smartest people. You know, when they talk about the elite. The elite. Do you ever see the elite? They're not elite. You're the elite. You are the elite. We're winning. You're smarter. You're better looking. You're sharper. And they call themselves elite. But if they're elite, then we're the super elite. True.
Now this framing is a different framing where we're talking about the foundational framing being, do you want a kingship, hint, tyrant, or do you want a republic? That's the framing. And behind it is a body of stories, some historical, some in popular culture, that support your framing. So then you can use epithets like King Don. You can refer to popular culture references like The Godfather if you want to paint your opponent in a negative light. But the point is, you then need to say them consistently over and over and over again so that you anchor the meaning structure. So essentially, to counter a dominant narrative, you can work either with a missing narrative or you can work within the underbelly of the dominant narrative, because invariably in moving in a particular direction, it's missing something. And in this particular case, what we're saying is that the Trump narrative is arguably vacated an awful lot that's to do with republicanism.
But I want to talk to you about what's happened with the Republican Party.
There is no Republican Party. There's a Trump Party. The Republican Party is kind of taking a nap somewhere.
So the two things we've looked at, how to counter the dominant narrative, and we've had two ways of doing it. One is by finding missing narratives, and the other is by working with the vacated space within that myth matrix or that compendium of stories. And what we saw is the ultimate myth with the 45th president is he's portrayed as a Republican, but he seems to have vacated everything that republicanism has ever stood for. So why not occupy that space? Seems to be like it's empty territory, and have republicanism and Trumpism, and ask the American people to make that choice. And that means you're taking control of the narrative back from him presenting you as rabid left-wing socialist, hint, hint, communists. So it's a move from capitalism to socialism to kingship versus monarchy, or tyranny versus monarchy.
Under the normal rules, I'll be out in 2024, so we may have to go for an extra term. We go to 20, we go to 24. Did you see it? Then it says 28, 32, 36, 40, 44.